It's match day in the Premier League. Arsenal take on Chelsea at the Emirates Stadium, looking to put a 9-point gap between themselves and their London rivals. Liverpool, of course, facing off against Newcastle in the League Cup final, meaning the chance to close a gap is there. A gap that is more of a chasm these days, but the chance is still there nonetheless. Good morning, hope you're doing well, and this is today's Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal News Show. Joining you every single morning at UK time. It's UK time every time here, but 8 a.m. specifically UK time. Thank you as always for tuning in, joining me. I very much appreciate you being here. Thank you to you all listening. I hope your week's been good. I hope your Saturday was good as well, and I hope that you're ready for a Sunday with Arsenal getting involved for the last time for quite a while. We have 2 weeks plus before Arsenal take on Fulham on the 1st of April. You got well over a fortnight to deal without that international break. Plus, it might as well be called, with England, of course, taking on Albania and I want to say Latvia. Just off the top of my head, I feel like it is indeed both those games at home for England. Of course, Lewis-Skelly involved in the England national team alongside Declan Rice, formerly Arsenal player Aaron Ramsdale, also in the squad too. So plenty of things to discuss as well. Good morning to those joining in the chat box. Zoom, John, Carlton, Paul, back-to-back Pauls. James, Stevie, Black Shine, NSW, Matt G, Granddaddy Gooner, Paul Jr., more back-to-back Pauls. And Paul's going for a prediction of a 3-1 Arsenal win here. We're going to go through your predictions and some of our lineups, of course, and our thoughts on those a little bit later on as well in our mini preview. So look ahead. And just, I know that saying this often provokes people who like to spoil things. I've not watched the F1 yet. Please try. If it means I have to shut down my chat box today, I might have to. But please, no F1 spoil. I mean, there might be some people in the chat box who have not yet watched the F1 as well. So if you could try and avoid giving me anything, that would be great. I would really appreciate it. That would be fantastic. Right. Let's jump right now into today's stories. Not loads to discuss, I'll be honest with you. Not loads to discuss today. We've got mainly kind of a little bit of transfer news. Obviously, a look ahead to tomorrow's game and some more. But David Ornstein on The Athletic yesterday did a little bit of a Q&A with supporters. There was a few questions around Arsenal, not loads. But he was asked whether or not it's true that both Bruno Guimaraes and Martin Zubimendi could be signed by Arsenal, and whether or not Arsenal have a £300 million budget. We obviously talked about the war chest, didn't we, yesterday? Well, he has said, let's get going. Now, this is a personal opinion rather than a sourced bit of information, but I don't see Arsenal signing Zubimendi and Guimaraes. We know about the historical Guimaraes links, but that ship seemed to have sailed. I'm not sure I can envisage Arsenal paying the kind of money Newcastle would ask for him, who, like Alexander Isak, they probably want to keep, especially given that he turns 28 this year. Zubimendi is at a very advanced stage, and the anticipation inside Arsenal that he is coming in. The deal would be significant financial outlay, as would any move for a striker. There's also work to do, possibly in wide attacking positions, awaiting the decision of Rosenborg midfielder Sverre Halseth-Nipan, person who, for some reason, we ended up calling severe knee pain the other day. Perhaps something in defence, 1 or 2 goalkeepers. And although there will be exits, I'm not sure recruiting Zubimendi and Guimaraes would be feasible, even if Berta did want that, which I don't know that he does. On the £300 million reports, he says, I'm not aware of a specific number, but Arsenal recently posted healthy financial results. They're expected to qualify for the Champions League again, and they didn't spend in the winter window. So there will definitely be room to manoeuvre. I'd expect it to be a pretty busy summer at the Emirates. So there you go. There's David's thoughts on things as they are right now, which is obviously a really good place to be. And you can still be able to be aware that Arsenal could spend big during this window without it being a situation where 300 million war chest stories are running around like mad. We know, of course, that these are situations that Arsenal want to control. These are situations that Arsenal do not want leaks about how much money they have to spend coming out. And frankly, they wouldn't want that out there. But we're treading old ground. We talked about this quite a lot in the last couple of days, so I'm not going to go over it again. But the idea of Arsenal signing both Guimaraes and Zubimendi, I said to you, I thought was a little unrealistic. And it seems certainly David agrees with that. Moving into more transfer stuff, the other story of today is that Arsenal's transfer plans are thought to have changed off the back of the rise, of course, of both Ethan Nwaneri and Miles Lewis-Skelly. Arteta said that those modifications to the squad plan are always very positive. When you predict the amount of minutes that those players were going to play this season, it was going to be a super low number. Tier 3 or Tier 4 players. Suddenly they are starting to play some very impressive numbers. You have to rethink, which is something super positive. You already have in-house, so you don't have to recruit. So this is, I think, a fairly obvious scenario. I've seen some people react to this story and think, oh, look at this, Arsenal penny pinching again. They get some players through that are through the academy. Now they're not going to spend that. Of course they're not going to spend money in positions where they've now got brilliant options. Why would they? Why wouldn't the transfer plans change? Of course the transfer plans change. You do not want to block the pathway with a signing of two of the best young talents in English football. And both of them have surprised, I think, Arteta and us as fans with how good they have been. At the start of the season, I don't think anyone anywhere would have predicted that Miles Lewis-Skelly would have risen to a level that he got a senior England international call-up this year. Like, it would have been nuts to have predicted that. Ethan Nwaneri, of course, we thought might have a breakthrough this season, but certainly not, I don't think, to the level that he has. And that's come about because of injuries, yes, but that's him taking opportunities. That's him taking that chance. Yes, there should always be adaptability. Transfer plans should always change if scenarios change. Unfortunately, Arsenal haven't changed in a positive way in January when they had those injuries and needed to act. They didn't change positively then in that certain way. But absolutely, we should not be looking to spend money in potentially blocking the pathway of these two players. We may have before, because we didn't know what type of impact they were going to have, and that means you can't not sign players that you've ultimately planned for just because you've got a 16, 17-year-old that you don't know their impact. But when you do know what their impact is, then obviously you are going to change, the way in which you operate in the market. And it means that it doesn't mean Arsenal won't sign players. They have them. It means that they can now invest money in other areas. They can put more focus into the left-hand side of the forward line. They can put it in more into the midfield, in the defensive or the number 8 position, or in the centre-forward position, or maybe as a left-sided centre-half when Kivior moves on, or a backup goalkeeper. We can invest more money there. It's about moving around those funds. It's about not doing business at all. It's about reorganising how in which you want to channel that investment because of these young players coming through. And I think it's just a little short-sighted of those to just read the story or read those quotes from Arteta and go, oh, look, Arsenal not spending again. They've got an excuse to save their money. That's not the way that this works. So I just wanted to graciously go through that. We're going to go to part 2, which is going to be a quick look ahead to today's game against Chelsea, which, of course, takes place at 1:30 this afternoon UK time at the Emirates Stadium. Okay, this is a quick look ahead to this afternoon's game against Chelsea. Arsenal taking on the team currently 6 points behind them in the table, so they can move 9 points clear and effectively confirm that top 4 place, I think, by opening that gap. Nottingham Forest, again, another really impressive win for them. They, of course, won their back-to-back games after drawing with Arsenal, previously losing the 2 games before that. Amazing to think that if Nottingham Forest had managed to beat Fulham away from home and Newcastle away from home, they would currently be sitting 5 points ahead of Arsenal right now. But that's just not the way things have gone down. And as a result, of course, that gap is just 1 point, but Arsenal do have a game in hand to move that back up to 4. They can put that cushion between themselves and Forest in second place. Chelsea, as I mentioned, could move within 3 points of Arsenal with a victory. Manchester City drew yesterday with Brighton, meaning Arsenal can reopen the gap to them and 5th place to 10 points with a victory, while Newcastle, of course, are not playing this weekend. They're still down there on 47 points, but they have a game in hand over Manchester City now. Meaning if they get that result, they would move 2 points clear. And also if Arsenal were to beat Chelsea, Newcastle could have the chance to go back into fourth in the table, of course, again with a victory in their next game, which happens to be at home to Brentford, who also got a very good result for themselves against Bournemouth, effectively putting Bournemouth, I think, out of the race for the top four in the end. But it's still very tight there. Aston Villa, of course, on 45 points. Brighton now on 47 points, same as Newcastle, but having played a game more. From an Arsenal point of view, in terms of the team that I want to see, I think the return of Gabriel Martinelli does... Oh, I've got double rice. I've ordered double rice in my 11 this morning. Let's change that up. Goodness gracious me. How's that happened? Let's swap that around. Partey at number 6. I'm glad that you guys are on it this morning and noticing these things, because I certainly didn't. I certainly didn't notice that I'd managed to do that. So let's just change that around, shall we? Get rid of that, put that up. Lovely stuff. Share the screen one more time. And hopefully now, there we go. There we go. Partey's in the team. I ordered double rice. Never go double rice. Anyway, the lineup for me, of course, with Gabriel Martinelli coming back is Trossard, Martinelli, Nwaneri as the front three. I've put Martinelli at centre forward here. The reason why I've done that is I just want to see it happen. I think it's something that we might see as an opportunity when Saka returns for us. But I think that Martinelli, I'd rather see in that centre-forward role more so than Trossard. We've seen Trossard in that position, and it's hot and cold. And to be honest, sometimes he finds himself a little bit too isolated, I feel, at times, and isn't able to do his best work. Whereas Martinelli, I almost think playing in those wide positions that Martinelli over-complicates things. Maybe if he was playing through the middle, it would allow him to simplify his game somewhat more. So I've gone with that front three. Odegaard, Rice and Partey in midfield, not double Rice. Timber, Saliba, Gabriel and Miles Lewis-Skelly at left back. I think he needs to ride that wave of momentum from that call-up for the senior England squad as well. Raya, of course, in goal. Let's have you some of your predictions, scoreline predictions for the chat box. Now is your time to get those in. I'm personally going to go with a 2-0 Arsenal victory in this game. I think it will still be pretty tight. Chelsea are missing some players. No Malo Gusto, no Noni Madueke either. And no, there's someone else. Jackson, of course. No Jackson today, or Mark Guy as well. He's not in there either. But I still think it'll be a pretty tight game. Deepak's going for a 2-1 Arsenal win. Robert's going 2-0 Arsenal. John's going 1-0 Arsenal. NSW's going for a 10-0 Arsenal win. Blackshine says 3-2. Oslo Gooner says 3-0. Cal says 3-1. Barry says 2-0. Bavin says 3-1. Oliver says 2-1. Runs of Cal says 3-0 as well. Deepak says there are going to be a late call on Cole Palmer today. Cole Palmer, of course, did play against Arsenal earlier on in the season in that 1-1 draw at Stamford Bridge. I don't know about any late calls to be made on Cole Palmer. I think he's going to be fine from the sounds of things. I asked my Chelsea colleague at Football London. He didn't list him in the players. They thought he wasn't going to be there. So I think Cole Palmer will be there. I'll be very surprised if he isn't. But maybe I'll do a quick Twitter search and see if anything comes up that's dropped this morning that we happen to have missed. Apparently he is a doubt for the game. Late call. I've heard nothing to suggest that that's the case, but let's wait and see what goes down. Jide says 5-0 to the Arsenal. North London Forever says 2-1 Arsenal. Temi says a 5-0 defeat. Palmer quartets plus a freak Raya own goal. Temi with his usual reverse psychology this morning. Right, let's go to part 3. Your questions and more right after this. Okay, this is part 3 of the show today, where we're going to tackle some of your questions in the chat box. So if indeed you've got any, now is the time to throw them in. John says, could you see Max Dowman breaking into the squad next season, or is he still too young and needs more time to develop? I can definitely see him getting some minutes. He's playing quite a lot with the Arsenal first team already in training. Mikel Arteta, I think, has been frustrated by regulation that he's not been able to use Max Dowman in the team already. I think he's very, very much enamoured by his ability and talent, and I think wants to give him an opportunity, and would have done so already if it wasn't for these issues that we've been having to deal with the legislation. So, yeah, I think, John, there is a good chance that we will see Max Dowman in the first team next season at some point, maybe off the bench, maybe in some Carabao Cup games, but there's a good chance we see him in the team this year. Matt says, with Edu no longer at the club, who at Arsenal do you think would host the best? But it was Arteta, isn't it? Have you seen Arteta's barbecue? Massive. It's like there's that famous picture, isn't there, of Arteta's barbecue? Let me see if I can find it. Because I'm sure there is a picture that was going around. Yes, I found it. He was asked about this on the All or Nothing series. Let me share the screen. There you go. Look at that. Brilliant stuff. There's a quote with this as well. According to Telegraph, says, "I make barbecues all year round. I did one 2 days ago. We put chorizos on there, different cuts of meat, Argentinian cheeses. I just like building a proper fire. It takes 40 to 50 minutes. The kids are around. The sound of the fire. We're all keeping warm next to it. I love that moment." That was in an interview with the Telegraph that he did that. But yeah, it's Arteta. It has to be Arteta. Come on, this the Arsenal lore. Knowledge that needs to be known about these things. Aidan says, with FFP and other financial restraints, does it let owners off the hook, as there is a maximum they can invest of approximately £40 million a season beyond income? I think that Arsenal's FFP has always been the key part of what restricted them previously. The big issue that Arsenal have got at the moment is regarding wages. There is an ultimate kind of barrier in terms of how Arsenal can spend on wages, and we have already significantly significantly increased our wages in terms of our expenditure. And there was like £90 million a year or something crazy like that increase in our wages from last year's books to this year's most recent published accounts. Now, we are seeing Partey leaving, Jorginho leaving, Tierney leaving, and a number of others potentially leaving as well. These are decent-sized earners, of course, on the club's books, which should open up some more room for us. But it's still something that needs to be. Whether or not the restrictions get the owners off the hook, I said before, like, for me, January was not about the ownership. It was not about Arteta. January was all about those that are in charge of recruitment, those behind Arteta in the recruitment team, the interim sporting director, Jason Nato, and others. They're the ones who are responsible for finding the solutions to what Arteta wants. We know that there was money to spend because we made that offer for Ollie Watkins. There was financial room there to spend in January. They opted not to, or instead they were unable to find the solutions within the confines of what they could spend during that window. In the summer, that is different. Arsenal could spend and can spend a significant amount of money. But Arsenal will only, as we know, buy players that they deem are good enough for this group. They will not sign players for the sake of signing players. We'll have to wait and see who that ends up turning out to be. Truth says, Tom, would you try Ethan down the middle? He's more physical than the other two and better finisher maybe than Martinelli. I think it's certainly something that we'll look at. And Arteta has spoken quite at length about the fact that he can play and could play as a centre forward in the future. So, yes. I do think that that's something that we might see. Quest says, who is a journalist that you looked up to or have been inspired by as you began your journalistic career? Well, of course, you know, people like David Ornstein, naturally, you look up to as somebody who's in that space that's amazing at finding stories and scoops, building contacts and networks. We had Sid Lowe on the channel the other day. As someone who previously invested a lot of time into Spanish football when I was at university, Sid's Spanish football podcast with Phil Kitchen-Melides was always something I looked to, and their coverage as well. But being kind of involved in the current set, I look up to those around me. I look up to my current, contemporaries and colleagues. I look up to what Simon does at the Standard and what Sam does at the Telegraph and Jordan at the Sun and Ed at the Guardian. These people have welcomed me so nicely, and there's others, of course, as well, that if I don't name them, it's nothing personal. Isan at the Mail, and Phil at PA, and Jordan at the Athletic, and Art Darosh, at the Athletic as well, has been absolutely lovely. All these people in my contemporaries as well, and I look up to their work and I read their work, and it inspires me to do more, to write better, to get on their level. Abby says James O'Brien. Yeah, I mean, from a non kind of sport aspect, James O'Brien is definitely someone that's had an influence on the way in which I tend to look for reason, to ask questions. That's certainly sculpted a lot of my debating abilities from listening to him. I've read his last 2 books, listened then through the audios of his last 2 books, 3 books actually, and I would highly recommend reading particularly. I would recommend reading How Not to Be Wrong and How to Be Right in a World Gone Wrong. Those 2 books are particularly excellent, so I'd recommend reading both of those. You can also read the latest one, which is How They Broke Britain, which is a lot more political, but I recommend reading that. But yeah, James O'Brien's definitely an influence for me. I know that he's a divisive character. I know that not everybody appreciates his views and everything. And I don't agree with everything he says, but his approach to presenting, to arguments and debates, and having those, and also admitting when you're wrong, admitting when you've got something wrong, is also a big thing about what he does. And if he's given an argument that he feels puts him in a position where he needs to re-challenge his own thoughts on something, then yeah, without a doubt, that is something that he would do. And John says Tom Swarbrick is excellent as well. I do enjoy when I'm driving at that time, chuck on an LBC and listen to Tom Swarbrick stuff as well. I think that's very much an influence. But I know there are going to be people listening to this that are thinking, "Oh God," so don't switch off if they're not your bag. The whole point is, of course, that we have people that we look up to that are different influences, and we agree with different people. And just because I listen to someone or agree with someone that you don't intend to agree with or listen to doesn't mean that we don't have to get along as well. Let's scroll up a little bit more. Rand says, Tom, you're a waffle hater. I know, just in love with pancakes too much. Natalie says, I say play with Martinelli, Trossard, Nwaneri and Saka, and then put Nwaneri back into midfield. Sorry for my English. You don't have to apologise for English, Natalie. It was spot on. So in terms of Nwaneri into midfield, kind of where Odegaard is, I guess, at the moment. So at times when, Saka returns, maybe playing with the Odegaard, Nwaneri double attacking pivot, if you like, that we've talked about before. I think it's definitely something I would like to see. A front 5 of Saka, Martinelli, Trossard, Nwaneri, Odegaard. I'd like to see that with Rice behind them in kind of like a inverted triangle shape, if you will, or an inverted diamond, if you like. But yeah, that's definitely something that I'd like to see. Bavia says, do you think Arteta will leave Saliba alone with Mbappe, or will Saliba and Gabriel be 2 versus 1 against Mbappe as well? It's hard, isn't it? Because you've got such talent in that attacking line with Jude Bellingham, Rodrigo, Vinicius Jr., Brahim Diaz if he plays. They've got so many options in attack. And you've got somebody like Modric feeding that. Fede Valverde, if he's not at right back, of course, could be there as well. Brilliant players. So it's difficult to know how Arteta is going to set up to effectively combat those players. Chino says, Tom, do you think MLS starts for England in the next instant? I don't think so. I think he might get some minutes, but I'd be surprised if he starts, but I could be proven wrong. Temi says, can you ask Arteta if Miles Lewis-Skelly is a midfielder playing left back or a left back who's comfortable playing in midfield? He actually has been asked that a couple of times, to be fair, Temi. And I always bring this up, and I know this wasn't your intention, Temi, but I do get a fair few DMs these days saying, can you ask Arteta this? Can you ask Arteta this? I don't take requests. I'll just put that out there very bluntly. There is not a request. Because as soon as what would happen is, oh, yeah, that's, I'll ask that question for you. It just wouldn't make sense. That said, I absolutely do take inspiration from you guys in the chat box. The conversations that we have and the fact that we listen to and I read a lot of your comments and read through the comment sections and exposed a lot to the kind of the fan culture. It without a doubt does inspire the formulation of questions that I do ask, at times. Not always, but definitely sometimes I will take something I've read or listened to with you guys in the chat, and it will definitely inspire certain questions that I've asked to Arteta. So despite not taking direct requests on questions, just know that, I'm always, when I'm reading these, they are very much being absorbed and taking as inspiration. And maybe you've asked me to request a question and I've actually ended up answering it or asking it anyway, just through coincidence. So you never know. Comp says, sorry, Tom, but you're partly wrong. Arteta does have some responsibility for the winter window. Players I've written several times Arsenal should sign: Mittelstadt, Hein, Boehner, and Benzema. I mean, I'd love for you to tell me what the blame actually is. Obviously, you listed some players there. You've not explained what the blame Arteta has is. Arteta's asked for signings. He's called for signings. They've not brought him signings. So I don't really know. It's not his job to sign the players. It's those behind him, above him, whose job it is to sign those players. He wanted to sign players. They didn't deliver him those players. I don't know where I can point the finger at him, to be honest. He's done more than I could have asked for in a window publicly regarding the potential for signings. Jay says, can you ask Arteta if he pumped me a few thousand on a season ticket waiting list next season? Yeah, I mean, I saw someone's number yesterday was like 23,000 or something crazy like that. Martin says, Tom, I'm about as far away from you on the politics spectrum as possible to get. I still listen to you every single day. And that's what I mean. We can have these broad spectrum of political views and be very, diverse in that, and very much paralleled opposites or perpendicular to one another. And despite Martin being wrong, he can still listen to me. It's great. So there you go. Ashley says, who is your defensive purchase? Our group plus Tommy in November, December return. Need one more. Seen some good names on the market. Tete Ola Aina on a free. Mark Gay, 1 year left. Tommy Akanji, 15 million. Just showed that you can get some deals that are quite cheap and clever. It's a really good question because I think we do need, ironically, another left-sided defender. Ural Hato, we know, is somebody that Arsenal have had a long-term interest in, but I think would be very, very expensive. Would be very difficult to get. I think somebody of that caliber in the team, especially when you've already got Lewis-Skelly, you've already got Calafiori. I think that there is something to be said about buying kind of that versatile Tomiyasu figure in the team again, someone who can play across the back line. But who that is a really tough question. I feel like I brought somebody up on the show recently whose name has escaped me. I like Ola Aina as a suggestion. I think that's a really good potential option, especially if he's on a free in the summer transfer window. I think I don't know if you've seen the video he did recently. I can't give credit to who the interview was done by, so I'm really sorry about that. Someone in the chat box maybe had to tell me who it was, but I did see a video of him doing an interview talking about the difference between playing against Liverpool and playing against Arsenal and what it's like playing against the two teams. It was a really interesting listen, actually. So I think Ola Aina would be a really interesting free signing, if indeed he is a free, unless maybe they have an option to extend his contract one more year. But I think that would be quite a good option for Arsenal. Just racking my brains. So I think there is somebody else as well that I have spoken about before. Tipsy says, I would have loved Dorgu at Arsenal. The issue with Dorgu is obviously he plays more as a left wing back. So Arsenal don't play that system. And that makes it pretty difficult to fit him into the side. Theo says, if we sign Zubimendi, does this mean Rice will play 8? What if we also sign Guimaraes? As we've talked about already today, I don't think we'd sign both. Zubimendi, I think, obviously is a 6. He's not a. I wouldn't describe him as like your classic DM. He's the Spanish Pivotti, if you like. That progressor from deep. And I think actually will slot straight into that team. I've seen a lot of discourse around Zubimendi and, people not being entirely convinced by him. I think you have to listen to those that watch him every single week, that have watched him for the last few years, and they cannot rave more highly about him. I know in the Champions League games playing for Real Sociedad, who tend to be, the weaker link of the two sides when you end up watching those games, that he doesn't always have the best of games necessarily. But I think in this Arsenal team, he really could flourish. I think it's a natural fit. I think Sid described it perfectly as being a natural fit, and I agree. I think that is the way forwards for a player like Zubi. Nike says, we will win the league next season for our 140th year anniversary. Bavia says, didn't we have long-term interest in Joel Hato? He can play left back. Yep, I think we just talked about that. Martin says, maybe Jonathan David on a free. It's someone that we could potentially look at as well. So Nicholas says, why haven't we really seen Nwaneri up top? He clearly has finishing skills because we've got barely any players, especially on the right-hand side. So we've needed him to play on the right, mate. That's why we haven't really been able to see him a centre forward, because as he's broken into the team, Saka's not been here. Martinelli's not really been here. Havertz has now not been here. Jesus has not been here. So we haven't seen Nwaneri in that position because we haven't been able to see him in those positions, ultimately. And Proper says, I watched him against Man United. He's very much more of a possession type player. And this is what I mean, is that the majority of games that Arsenal play, we dominate the ball. And I think that Zubi is going to be very, very key if indeed he signs, and there is a good feeling that he will. Very key in upgrading that position from Partey. And I know Partey is already a very good progressor of the ball, but Zubimendi is, for me, an even better player in that position at doing that particular job. I think in some games where we are less of the more dominant side, so away at City or Liverpool or some of the Champions League games against Real Madrid, for instance, I think that's when you'd play Rice deeper with Zubimendi together in more of a pivot style of structure. And then you give him that extra athleticism backup, if you will. I think that is how you would structure that. That is how you would deal with that in certain games. But when we are in games where we're more dominant, in more possession of the ball, Zubimendi is going to be very, very important for that. I'm going to bring the show to a close there, only because, of course, it's a very busy day and it's an early kickoff, which means I'm going to be leaving the house relatively soon, actually, to be able to get out there. I also want to try and get a run in if I can. As you can see, I'm dressed for it. So plenty to do this morning. I'll be back with you, of course, tomorrow. Will I be? Yeah, I should be. I should be with you tomorrow. I know I'm in the office tomorrow, but I should be still able to chuck you in a morning show before I grab a train out to East London. Looking forward to chatting about the game. Looking forward to covering the game. Of course, we'll have coverage of the match on the Football.London website. Myself and our Chelsea writer, Bobby Vincent, will be there covering the game this afternoon. And then, of course, hearing from Mikel Arteta in the post-match as well. Have an absolutely fantastic day. Enjoy yourselves. I know it'll be predicated very much upon the game and its result. But outside of that, stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.